Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast. Steve, Ramona.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I am your host, Steve Ramona. I am so thrilled to have you join us today. We dedicated this podcast to exploring the idea of how to live life and live your business with a purpose. And what's that purpose? I think having that servant's heart, being a servant, being able to give value to people. Imagine how much difference and impact you make in other people's lives, and it'll impact and change your life. Also, too, we have our guest motivate you, inspire you, and educate you. We hit all three, one of them, but we want to do that so you can take this podcast and run with it. I'll talk about at the end of the podcast how that's so powerful. But here's your homework today, audience. I want you to think about how you're going to serve yourself and others today and what impact and difference you'll make today. And I say today because it doesn't take a skill. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take much, but using your voice or using your arms or just taking action to serve somebody. And reach back out to me. Let me know how you feel, because I know I feel every day I get to do it. When I have great guests today, I get to serve them as well. And I want to thank our incredible sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Join a community of high-income entrepreneurs and business leaders to create a world-changing thought leader platform to grow your business and also educate you so you can do business better. How about that? For more information, just reach out to me. With that impact and difference, my guest talked about curiosity before the show. Are you curious? Philosophers are curious. Smart people are curious. Successful people are curious. I think it's an ongoing thing. We're going to talk much more than just curious, but I want to put that in your head before you listen. And let's welcome to our show, Dr. Gary. Welcome.
Steve, thanks so much. Really excited to be here with you today and looking forward to our conversation.
And as being transparent, humble, again, hosts screw up sometimes. How do you say your last name?
I say it Crotez, C-R-O-T-A-Z, Crotez. It's originally a French name, but it hasn't been French for a very long time.
That's why I can't say I'm not French. I'm just kidding. No, it's not. I can say Crotez. Dr. Gary Crotaz. Well, I want to jump in because you've got the DR in front of your name, but now you're an executive coach. How the heck does Dr. Gary go from medicine to executive coaching and helping people, inspiring people?
Well, that is the story, and there's an unlock moment in the middle of it. So when I left school, I wanted to be a doctor. In the UK, you go straight to medical school from school. And so I spent 8 years of medical school. I did the UK version of the MD PhD program that you have in the US, where you do both medical training and a PhD. So I have a medical doctorate and a PhD doctorate. And then at the age of 27, I suddenly figured out that actually that wasn't the career I wanted to pursue. And so I started looking at different things. And at 28, I left medical school, qualified, but didn't take my first hospital job. And I switched instead into business. I went on to spend about 10 years in consulting. And then I moved into the retail arena and I worked for a couple of global retailers here in the UK. And then in the pandemic, I was in my early mid-40s and I decided to make another career pivot into executive coaching, which has been my primary focus, I would say, over the last few years. And then along that journey, my secret double life was as a professional ballroom dancer. I'd always been a ballroom dancer from when I was very little. And so when I was in my corporate career, my wife and I were also training and traveling around the world, competing as professional ballroom dancers. So I guess my journey has been one of a lot of different facets to it, a lot of different changes. And to your point, my curiosity is to think about, really what is it that drives me? Because it hasn't been a sort of fundamental vocational drive. It's been something else. And I would say that it's only in recent years when I've been coaching and when I've been podcasting and I've been asking myself that question, how did I end up here? That I've really started to understand the power of curiosity.
I love that. And let's talk about curiosity, but it's amazing going from dancer, medicine, executive coaching. But one common thing in the audience, I tell people all the time, you're dealing with people. You're dealing
Right.
with judges, a dancer, as a medicine, you're dealing with patients. Now you're dealing with clients. But talk about curiosity, because I love what you told me about curiosity before the show.
So somebody said this to me on a podcast, and they said, Gary, I think you're a really curious person. And it was a word that I hadn't applied to myself before then. It wasn't that I wasn't curious, but I hadn't linked that word. And what that helped me to do was draw that kind of common thread through all of the things that I had done. And I really applied it to what I think of as my unlock moment. An unlock moment, a moment of remarkable clarity in your life or career when you suddenly figured out the path ahead. This is a lot of my work in coaching and podcasting. And I remember this moment that I am still today deeply curious about. When I was 27 years old, I wasn't doing anything particular. I was walking down the corridor in my lab that I was working in, and this thought came into my head that said, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. Being career in medicine. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. It wasn't a fully formed answer. It wasn't a solution that landed in my head. It was just permission to choose, permission to do something different. And as I have explored that moment over the last few years and talked a lot to different people about it and explored their moments too, what I realized was what I found in that moment was freedom. And what I then realized was that at various points in my journey since then, when I came to a fork in the road and I was deciding, do I go left or do I go right? For me, the path that I chose tended to be the one that felt like a greater degree of freedom. Now, everybody has their ways of choosing, and I realized that that was mine. It didn't feel like that along the way. It didn't feel in the moment that that's how I was making choices. But with the benefit of hindsight, looking back and looking for those threads, I think of freedom as my deepest underlying sense of purpose. But I figured that out in the last 3 to 5 years, no more. And, I've had 20 years in the business world, trying to navigate my past, trying to figure out where I want to go. But I didn't really understand until recently. And I started to look at these moments and be really curious about them, what was really underlying my thinking and my choices.
Great coaches have great experience. And that's what I'm hearing from you right now. And there's a lot of coaches out there, but as I always say, a coach with experience has the advantage because they lived through it. And thank you for sharing. Right? It's not that you can't, and not even you can always learn it and learn from others. I'm learning from you today and from all my guests. That's why I love podcasting. Now, you mentioned the two words that I live by. It's changed my life. Unlock moment. You got to talk about that. It's your podcast. We'll talk about that as well. But what does that mean?
So it means more than just a moment of figuring something out, which is, I sometimes I say that's like a little unlock moment. You're walking through life and you suddenly go, yeah, I want to work flexibly, not full time. Yeah, I want to move house to a different part of the country, whatever. That's like a little unlock moment, and it's helpful, it's meaningful. A true capital U, capital M unlock moment is one where you think back through your life, through your career, and I would ask you the question, when was there a moment where you remember exactly where you were, who you were with, what you were thinking, when this sudden, unexpected moment happened and you knew something you didn't know before? A lot of times people think about the high profile moments in their life, the day they got married, the day their child was born, the day they walked out from their job. And I'll ask the question, what was the day when you knew you were going to walk out of your job? And so somebody early on the podcast, he said, well, that was 6 years before I did, when I had this conversation with my boss. And he talked about a conversation that was about his boss saying, I don't really believe that you've got what it takes to make it. And he was like, well, I disagree with you, but also I now know that you don't believe in me. And so I now know that at some point, this is not my future. It was 6 years before he went on to make the change. But his unlock moment was the moment of clarity. And I think what I've discovered in exploring those is that you learn a different thing when you really hone in on the moment when you knew. I was in a conversation a year ago with a husband and wife, and both coaches, and I was talking to the wife, and we were talking about unlocked moments, and her husband was sitting there really quietly. And after about 10 minutes of being silent, he said, I know what my unlocked moment was. And then he talked about a conversation he'd had with his father at the age of 12, which was a similar kind of conversation about his father showed him that he didn't really believe in him. And in that moment, we were sitting around a table in a restaurant. This stuff started to come out about why it was that he's so driven, why it was that he's got this inner drive. And he said, I'd never fully connected it to that conversation. But now you ask me, that's where it started. And it was really a powerful moment for him. And I think that I find this when I'm coaching, I find this on the podcast, like live on the podcast, you see it. I do keynote speaking, and sometimes we'll run this on a stage at a conference, something like that. And there can be quite emotional moments. I'll tell you where I was when I named it an unlocked moment. So I'd always been curious about moments. I'd always been interested in the big questions, you know. I'm more a big question coach than a little question coach. And I was working with an actor. He was one of my very first coaching clients. I was coaching him for free, didn't have any money. And he was working in what's called fringe theatre in the UK, sort of London, you know, like the West End. But it was the kind of fringe theatre where you go to a pub, and above the pub is a theatre that seats 25 people. And he was in a show in that, right? So he was being paid something like, I don't know, £50 a week, something like that. Like there's no money in it. But he loved it. And he was quite early in his career. And he figured out that the dilemma that he was trying to figure out was, do I pursue what makes me happy, or do I pursue what makes me successful? Because when faced with the choice, he really felt like one path was, this is the show I want to be in, these are the people I want to work with, this is the song I want to sing. That's in the fringe theatre with no money. This is the path I'm supposed to go on with, the big parts, the big roles. I can see I'd be more successful and make more money, but I'm not sure I love it. And he really struggled with that question for a long time. And then one day he texted me at 4:00 in the morning. And his text just said, I've got it. And it woke me up because I hadn't switched my phone off its pings. And I said, what? And he said, I want to pursue happiness. What do you think? And I said a very non-coaching thing, which was yes. And he said, why are you so sure? I said, it's 4:00 in the morning. You've woken up. You've realized that's your answer. You've been struggling it for months. You've texted me. It's probably true. It might not be, but it's probably true. And it was true. And he started intentionally choosing happiness. So he would go for the audition if he loved it. He would sing the song that he thought he wanted to sing, not the one that he thought the casting director wanted to hear him sing. And 3 years on, he is now understudying a lead in the ensemble cast of Phantom of the Opera in the West End.
Oh my gosh.
His career has completely unlocked. And the reason why to you and me might sound obvious, which is he showed up and he was completely authentic. And I bet everyone really enjoyed his performances and saw the true him and put him in the show. You know, he went on a journey to get there. And lots of other aspects of his life have really changed too, because in realizing I can pursue happiness, even if that never makes me any money, even if I'm never successful, that's what I want, he let go of this weight of stuff. And I remember thinking back to that time and I was like, that's like an unlocked moment, a moment that unlocked him. And he came on and he was my episode #1 of the podcast. And he told this story. And then he came on quite recently and gave us the what happened next conversation. Because I said, you know, did you actually do anything different? And he said, absolutely. These are the things that I did differently as a result of that realization. And I tell that story often. I'm doing a workshop tomorrow morning at the Bank of England in London. And I'm playing a clip from his podcast where he says, it was so frustrating and you have to live through the uncertainty and you have to live through the struggle and you have to live through the pain of you haven't figured it out yet and you've got to sit with it. And when you do, you will give it time. And when you give it time, you'll find the answer and it's so worth it. And I've got all these people starting a coaching program and I'm just going to say to them, you got to hear him because he's been through it. And you're going to feel like that over the next 6 months, over the next 12 months. and it's so worth it. And you can't tell somebody that and they believe you. You've got to hear it from somebody that's been through it.
Exactly. Stories are incredible. That's what unlock your moment is. What's your story? Unlock your moment. And it's funny. It's probably the wrong word. Interesting is a better word. What you don't know, you don't know. If you don't know your moment, find that through whatever means possible, or story, because we can kind of cross that bridge. Moment is story, the story in your life. It's powerful. Well, that segues, and I see why you run your business so well, from that to your book, which is the idea mindset. So now I know my moment. How does your book come in to really launch me even further?
So I'm a very bad business person because I'm always trying to do myself out of business. I recently launched an AI executive coach so that people didn't need to pay for me. I wrote the idea mindset before the unlock moments, and it was actually that journey that my client was going through, the actor was going through. But I thought there are so many people who could benefit from coaching, but also, beyond pure coaching, could just benefit from somebody giving them some help and some structure in what questions are good to ask yourself to figure out your path ahead. And I come from background, I was a strategist in corporate. So I was always helping companies to think about, what are you about? What's important to you? What's your vision? What's your strategy? What's your plan? What help do you need? How are you going to tell people that story? And I sat one day and I went, you could just do that with people. And so what I did is I created this journey called IDEA, which stands for Identity, Direction, Engagement, Authenticity. So it's about figuring out who you are and where you're going for a future that you love and a future that connects with your deepest underlying sense of purpose. But the book is a workbook. So it is full of exercises that some of which are about yourself. So, doing your Gallup Clifton Strengths Assessment, for example, is sort of incorporated into the book with endorsement from Gallup. But also there's doing your own personal SWOT analysis, figuring out your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Thinking about what's more important to you. Is power more important? Is happiness more important? Is money more important? Is family more important? Is travel more important? Is legacy important to you? And when you go through, I really don't mind what your answers are, but you will ask yourself questions that you might not have answered before. And I've taken a lot of people through this journey, and I do it in one-to-one coaching, but I also do it in workshops. And consistently people come back and they say, I figured something out that I kind of knew before, but when I had to write it in the box in answer to that question, I went, yeah, I know the answer to that question. And so, yeah, the Idea Mindset is a book that's out there that is like, it's a coaching program. It's a full career or life coaching program, particularly for people. The ideal person with the Idea Mindset is people in their career where they're going, something needs to change and I don't know what. And I don't know what questions to ask to unlock it. And then you start going through the journey and you go, for me, it's about forming my plan, or for me, it's about building my team, or for me, it's about telling my story. And you can go into the bit that helps you do that. It's my mission really there to broaden access to coaching. There's a bit of data that always surprises me even when I think about it. Globally, licensed accredited coaches with the major coaching federations, there's probably about 100,000 coaches across all of the major coaching federations. On average, they've probably got 5 clients each at any one time. So that means that in the world, maybe there's 500,000 people benefiting from coaching, maybe 1 million. How many people are there in the world who could benefit from coaching? Tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, who are in a leadership role, who are entrepreneurs, who are running their own business, who are in senior leadership. There's never going to be enough human coaches to serve all of those people. And so the work that you do, the work that I do, with books, with podcasts, it's making that accessible to all the people that can't find or can't afford their own executive coach. It's wonderful if you can have an executive coach, but
sure,
it's expensive. It's very expensive. And a lot of people can benefit who can't afford it. And so I do think that part of the mission that we all share in trying to get stuff out there is you shouldn't have to pay for so much stuff that can change your life.
I like that. And you mentioned something that was very interesting to me is I'm putting myself out of business, giving all this stuff away for free. An audience, do it. if you're a coach, age, I don't care, give all your IP away for free. I've done that and my life is completely changed. I'm more successful now at 63 than I have in 40 years because I do a free podcast workshop. I love that you do that because it's the universe that talks to you and says, thank you, Dr. Gary. Thanks for putting out there. And by the way, they're going to need you. Say 100 people take it. I say 50% are going to eventually reach out, go, hey, you taught me this. Can I learn more? And that's where those people become a client. And real quick, I think there's over 2 billion people in the world. Let's use a 10% rule. That's 200 million people. If I did that right, 200 million people that need coaching. And you're saying it's only 1 million right now. So there you go. Yeah. The numbers speak for itself.
Yeah. So this is the thing that blew my mind over Christmas, because people have been telling me for a while to get into this ChatGPT world and figuring out what that's all about. And I played around with it, but not enough. And then somebody said to me, who is a senior director of a business I'm working with in India, and he said, I am 5 times as productive because I've really embraced using ChatGPT and other similar kind of models. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take some time over Christmas. I'm going to get my head around what this is. And I signed up to the $20 a month thing. And I was playing around with creating a custom GPT. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I gave it my book. Because you can feed it some content and it trains it. And then you give it a little bit around, you're an executive coach. You know, you speak with Gary Crotaz's tone of voice. You know, you're generally positive. You ask questions. And from signing up and putting my credit card details in and having $20 a month taken off my account to having an active conversation with an executive coach trained on the full text of the idea mindset was 15 minutes. And it blew my mind. And then I went, I wonder what would happen if I inputted all of the podcast transcripts of all the podcasts I've ever done into this same thing. So over the course of a few days, I got one of the transcription tools to transcribe all the podcasts, 1 million words of content. And I put it in and I said, and you know that too. And suddenly I've got 150 of the world's greatest coaches and leaders who've been on the podcast talking about their personal stories, their lessons, and it knows it all. And I was like, I'm going to put this out for free. And so I created, and it's called Executive Coach. You can find it on the ChatGPT store. Anybody can use it. It's freely available. And I've been using it 5 times a day because it knows 1 million words of content, which is about 20 business books. I don't know that much about unlocked moments because I can't remember it all. And I started asking it questions like, what is an unlocked moment? And it knew what an unlocked moment was. Then I asked it a question that I didn't know the answer to, which is, how do you have an unlocked moment? And it said, well, these are the kind of conditions that you can put yourself in that make you more likely to have an unlocked moment. And I sat there and went, I can't answer that question. When people ask me, how can you have an unlocked moment? I go, well, it's a sudden remarkable moment of clarity. You don't see it coming. So I kind of, I think that you could probably meditate, you could probably get yourself into a calm place, but I don't really know. And I wish there was a recipe because I could sell it for loads of money, but I'm not sure there is one. The whole thing is it's unexpected, but when it happens, it tells you something about yourself. And then my ChatGPT executive coach told me some things that I didn't know, but it came from bringing together all of those thoughts, all those ideas, all those stories. And we are in such an exciting time right now, precisely because if we use it well, the AI can help us to get in touch with ourselves. And what a weird thing that is. I'm thinking, just as I'm describing this to you, that AI can help us to get more in touch with our humanity. But in reality, that's what it's doing, right?
And that's the power. And like internet and everything, there's good and bad. Today's the day that China has turned out an AI and there's a big up war and the stock market went crazy and all that. We're not going to get into that, but you're right. And that's anything. That's a coach. That's AI across the board. There's good and there's bad, and just need to do research and be aware. And I love that. We're coming to the end here. Real quick answer to this question. What does success mean to you? Because ROI is so important for everybody.
Success for me, and I got this from somebody that I spoke to recently, he said, happiness is having more, needing more. I'll be happy when I have a bigger car, a bigger house. He said, contentment is when you know the meaning of enough. And for me, that's how I think about success. Success is knowing you have enough
Why
that's
did I
enough.
know you'd give me an incredible answer? Just listening to you this whole 22, 20, whatever minute, doesn't matter. That's a beautiful answer, because it's we got to be careful of scoreboards, houses, homes, jets, money, da da da. Yeah, they're all important, but a goal to me is a guide. It's not, I would love to have a Learjet to fly everywhere so I can meet people and help. That's a guide. If I get it, great. If I don't, I don't. So let's end on a great note. This has been such a great podcast. God bless you. I love what you're doing. I love the book. And by the way, go out and get it. The Idea Mindset. Where can they get the book?
They can get it on Amazon and all
Anywhere.
good bookshops. Yeah.
You can follow my lead, because as a host, I've got to have the idea mindset, because I'm doing ideas every day in a podcast like you are. And where can they find the podcast?
They can find it on Apple, on Spotify, all the major podcast platforms. It's also at theunlockmoment.com.
There we go. Perfect. Of course, he's got it all set up. That's what a good coach does. So I like a fun question. Speaking of acting, I've got a little improv here. So in the UK, I've got a restaurant reserved for you, table of 4. You're, of course, going to sit in one of the chairs. In the other 3 empty chairs, who would you invite to sit with you and talk, dead or alive? Why would you want them sitting there? And what food would you order?
Wow. I definitely invite my wife, Mildred, because she wouldn't let me hear the last of it if there was an amazing dinner and she wasn't there. I'd invite... Who would I invite? I would invite my favorite ever podcast guest, who's called Micah Librant, who was one of Gallup's top strengths coaches, and she's one of the people I think that understands unlock moments more than anything else. And I would invite Dr. Ruth Gotian, who is another podcast guest, who wrote an amazing book called The Success Factor, where she looked at the habits of the world's most successful people, and she's a brilliant connector of people. And I think what we'd be talking about would be achieving extraordinary goals. A lot of the people that I work with, they say to me, what's your niche? And I say, I work with people with extraordinary goals. Whether that's they want to win the world championship, or they want to be the CEO of the company, or they want to achieve a promotion that their boss isn't really sure they're capable of doing. That's also an extraordinary goal. So I think we'd be talking about that. We'd be eating, my wife would say, we'd be eating whatever I had the last 3 days, because I always eat the same things.
It's okay. What is that food? What was the last thing you ate that was good?
Pizza this afternoon.
There we go. Pizza. Okay, now this is the greatest show in the world. Pizza in the UK. I love it.
Perfect.
That's what we're talking about. And it's interesting about extraordinary goals. You lived it. You went from dancer, medicine, to coach. Who would have thought, while you're dancing, I walked in, hey, you're going to be an executive coach in 10 years. What the hell are you talking about? Look at me, I'm a ballroom dancer. So you lived it. Love it. I want to thank you so much. How can people reach out to you, connect with you, talk to you?
So I've got a website, GaryCrotaz.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So if you're listening and you're interested in what we're doing, then reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you'd love a podcast recommendation, I'm really happy to point you in the direction of a great conversation that will resonate with whatever you're working through at the moment.
Oh, that's perfect. See a servant's heart to the very end. And that's what I love. Great guests like that. And here's what I was saying in the beginning about the end. Podcasts to me are gifts. I don't mean podcast people that talk about it, people, and it's growing, it's massive. Here's why. So you're listening to Dr. Gary and you get this moment of, oh man, my friend he's got this unlocked moment he's not aware of. Well, guess what? You send that link, you subscribe to the YouTube channel, it gets the link sent to you, you grab it and you send it to him, go, hey, you got to check out Dr. Gary. I think he can help you with your life, with things going on, like the actor he mentioned. This person goes and watches it and listens for 10 minutes and goes, oh my God, and reaches out to Dr. Gary, either becomes a client or Dr. Gary gives him a tip and he unlocks his moment. Let's go back to you. That's the best gift you can give somebody. Did you hear the story of the actor? Do you think that wasn't a gift that Gary Doctor gave him? Yeah, of course he paid him. Well, in this case, it was free actually. But of course, people pay for it. But that's the power of gifts. Even more, that's the power of podcasting. We can unlock people's moments everywhere, no matter what podcast it is. So go ahead and use those podcasts as gifts. Comment on the YouTube channel. If it's for Gary, I'll make sure he gets it. And with that being said, me and Dr. Gary want to thank you all for watching and listening to this podcast. We'll see you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. God bless everybody.